I'm Sherry Kendall, and welcome to Hometown Salutes. I want to introduce my guest today. It is veteran Larry McKinley. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you.
Well, let's get started about your story. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Were you born and raised in Connersville?
I was born in Columbia, just outside in the country about 3-4 miles south of Connersville. But I was raised in Connersville from the time I was 6 years old.
Okay. So when you enlisted, did you enlist or were you drafted?
We enlisted. Jimmy Seidel and Kirk Matthews and I all enlisted at the same time.
So I think that's a picture here of them.
Yeah.
So you guys were you in school together?
We were in school together. Went through from 7th grade up on. We were in the same home rooms, not necessarily the same classes.
So what made you decide to go into the Navy? And why the three of you? I mean,
I don't know what made them decide, but I had an uncle. He was married to my dad's younger sister, and he was in the Navy. And my dad's sister also, she worked for Chester Nimitz, admiral in Washington during the war. Before, after the war, they made him. He was the top guy in the Pacific, and she worked for him as a secretary for several years. And she'd tell me how nice he was to her and how he treated all the people that worked with him. And then I got to meet him one time in Pearl Harbor, and he was an awesome guy. So I like that, and I like the idea of travel, and I like the idea of a girl in every port, but that didn't work out for me.
So were your parents supportive about you enlisting?
They sure were, yeah.
So tell me about that day. You three go where to get on a bus?
We got on a bus down in front of the post office here, and they took us to Cincinnati, and took us through all kinds of medical tests, and they measured us and weighed us and all that stuff, and it's kind of funny. I probably wouldn't have got in if they had a guy measure me who couldn't reach the top of my head. It was an Army guy, and they put us up on a scale which was probably 6 or 8 inches off the floor, and I'm 6'3", so he reached about here, and he put the thing here and called me 6 foot, but I only weighed 128 pounds. So if I'd have been 6'3" at 128 pounds, they probably would not have taken me.
Oh, funny.
So I went all the way through there, and every time if a shore patrol would stop me or something, they'd say, "Are you sure this is you? You're taller than 6 foot." I said, "Well, that guy just couldn't read or measure and take me."
So you got through?
I got through, yeah.
So did you three stay together through your
No, we didn't. And sadly, Jimmy came home on leave for Christmas, and he was in a car sitting talking with his girlfriend and fell asleep, and he died of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Oh, wow.
And he'd only been out of boot camp a short time, and he was a great guy too, and really sad.
So this is your Navy picture?
That's that's when I first got out of boot camp, and they took that as we were going into machinist mate school. I'm not sure what their ratings were, but I went to machinist mate school. It was like 13 weeks of schooling after the boot camp was over. And,
so what did you think of boot camp? How was it?
Well, boot camp was a little rough sometimes, but I mean, it wasn't killer rough. It wasn't, I don't think anybody got hurt. Sometimes it gets your feelings hurt. But no, I had a good experience everywhere in the Navy, really. I never had any serious problems at all. The only time I ever even had got on the report, we were in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, and we were escorting ships, supply ships into Quemoy and Matsu Island off China. And that's when the Chinese were still trying to take Taiwan.
Oh, okay.
And so they were on martial law all the time. So and they told us when we got there, if you get caught on the beach after midnight, don't try to get back to the ship because they'll shoot you if they catch you on the street. They'll think you're a spy. So I did that, and I fell asleep. I think I might have had a little bit more to drink than I should.
That's funny.
And
so when you were in boot camp, is this when you were jumped off? Was that during boot camp?
Yeah, this was during boot camp. You
okay.
Know, why
don't you tell that story?
Yeah, in order to get out of boot camp, you have to know how to swim. And most everybody knew how to swim, but some of the guys, the guy there, his name was Shriver, he was from Portsmouth, Ohio.
That's him there, right?
Yeah,
yep.
And he was a good friend of mine, and we kind of hung out together. And he was behind me in the line. We had to get up on this platform, it was like 12 foot high, and jump into 12 foot of water, and then you had to swim over to the edge and tread water for 15 minutes before you could get out. Well, he didn't tell anybody he didn't know how to swim. He just jumped in, and I was already over the edge, and I saw him hit the water, and I saw him go down. Then he came up, and when he came up, he was rubbing his eyes like that because he got water in his eyes, and he wore glasses, and his eyes bothered him, I think. And he just settled back down and was sitting on the bottom. And we started yelling. Everybody started yelling, "Hey, he's going to drown!" And one of those guys said, "Just take it easy. Here, we got him. We'll take care of it." And so they sent a guy down to get him, and they had a pole that they stuck out there, and the guy got a hold of it and put him on his back and drug him over to the edge and pumped him out.
So he learned to swim real fast.
Right, yeah. Actually, they gave him classes. He ended up being a better swimmer than
really?
any of us because they taught him the right way to do it. We learned how to do it in the creek.
That's funny. So after boot camp and you went to machinist training? Yeah,
machinist mate, and it was just in the same camp, only not in the boot camp part. It was in the schooling. They had just built a bunch of new school buildings or buildings to live in while he was going to school.
And where is that at?
And that's in Great Lakes.
In Great Lakes,
yeah,
okay.
We didn't have to move.
Oh, nice.
We just moved from one side of the camp to the other side.
Okay.
And, they taught us everything. Machinist mate rating is it's kind of deceiving because a lot of people think you're a machinist. Well, I'm not a machinist. I mean, I knew how to do that stuff, and I still can do it. But the machinist mates take care of everything on the ship: refrigeration, the steam engines, generators, electrical boards. I mean, everything that has to do with making that ship go, machinist mates have it. They even work some in the boiler room with the guys on pipes and stuff. And you have to replace broken pipe, broken valves, or whatever.
Wow.
Sometimes, I remember one time we had a bearing went out on a main shaft on the after engine room, and we got a commendation from the captain because we fixed it by hand. I mean, right there. We didn't have any of the tools. Couldn't put a new one in. We had to fix the one that was in there.
Oh wow!
And it was a Babbitt type bearing, so it was a nightmare. But we got it fixed pretty quick, and the captain thought we were geniuses.
That's awesome. So after you finished that, then where did you go? Where were you stationed?
Well, we went to. They stationed me in Pearl Harbor. I went aboard the Douglas A. Monroe as a destroyer escort, and DE 422 is the number on it. And one thing about the destroyer escorts, it's still considered a tin can. That's what they call all the destroyers.
Okay.
But you have destroyer leaders, which is a large frigate type. Then DD is a destroyer, and a DE is an escort destroyer, which is the same thing as a destroyer. It's just an older version that they are doing away with, and they'll make a DE out of it until they can replace it. A DE is a destroyer escort. It's a smaller ship, and it's a slower ship. So where a destroyer will cruise at like 38, maybe 40 knots, a destroyer escort will only cruise at 28 knots maximum speed.
Very slow.
So nobody wanted to operate with us. You know, no admiral wants to go 28 knots when he can go 40 or 45. So only one time that I was on that ship, I remember we had to operate with an admiral, and we were in Sydney, Australia, and we were supposed to go to Melbourne from there and then New Zealand, and this admiral came along and saw us sitting there, and he said, I think I'd like to have that ship go back. So we had to go back to Pearl with him.
Oh,
and,
funny.
We weren't too happy about it.
How many tours did you do?
Yeah. Oh, goodness. We went to Westpac, Japan, and we didn't do the same tours all the time. Like they came when the fighting broke out in Lebanon. Mm-hmm. They came and we had just loaded dummy ammo on for practice. We had to take it all off, reload the food supplies, and load live ammo to go to Lebanon. Well, just about the time we got it all loaded, they had LSTs, which are landing ships for troops, and they're a humongous ship, but they don't draw much water. They're mostly sitting on top of the water, and they have two big doors on the front that open up. They can drive a tank in there and drive it off onto the beach.
Oh, wow.
And they were training this Chinese guy, Taiwanese guy, to operate that ship. He was going to be the captain. And he came in to dock behind us. And when he did, he didn't put it in reverse quick enough. And he slid that thing right up on our fantail and knocked our depth charge racks off into the bay.
Gosh.
And actually a depth charge went down her, so they had to get divers down there to get the thing. They was afraid it would blow up. So we had to unload all those supplies we just had loaded.
Just did. Oh my gosh.
And we didn't make it to Lebanon because the fighting was over before we ever even got out of port. But they then sent us to Kaohsiung, Formosa, and we escorted ships in and out of Quemoy and Matsu, and we patrolled the coast to keep any people from coming out from China over there and sabotaging things. And they kept, they were on martial law there all the time, so if you couldn't be out at night, they'd shoot you or they'd arrest you, and if you moved the wrong way, you'd get shot. So we stayed there we did 20 days station ship in Hong Kong, and we came back to Formosa again, and we spent, we had a part break on our sonar, and we couldn't go to sea for like a month, so these other ships took our place. Well, when we got the part, got it fixed, we had to repay them and take their place, so they took us to sea for 2 months.
Oh, gosh.
And we spent Christmas and New Year's on that ship on the roughest water in the country, in the world, probably. That Formosa Straits is constantly rough. And
Did you handle it well? Like,
oh yeah, yeah. Oh, I have a funny story about that. We had to highline our Christmas. They highlined our Christmas too. They sent another ship out with our Christmas gifts and stuff from home, and highlined it over to us, and refueled us at sea. But I was on. They put in the Navy. They don't have like a KP. They have a mess deal where you do like 2 weeks or a month of mess duty, and then you don't have to worry about it again.
Okay.
Well, they put me in the chief petty officer's cabin. I had to serve the chief petty officers. There was like six people that I had to serve. And the water was so rough, a lot of times the waves might be 30 or 40 foot high. The ship would go up in the air, and then it would lay over on its side a little bit and fall back in the water because the water was gone now. And when it hit that water, it would just thump, like that. It would almost throw you across the room. And we had a double coffee pot that was sitting on a double burner.
Yeah.
And the burner was hooked to an electrical plug and screwed in so it couldn't move. The ship went up. I had 2 brand new pots of coffee on there, and I was getting ready to mop the floor. The ship went up, turned. When it came back down, there's suction cups that's holding that coffee pot burner thing. When it hit, those suction cups turned loose, and here come that thing right at me. Two cups of coffee, and I backed up, and those coffee pots went right by me. And one of the chiefs was, he had worked late at night. He was in bed asleep, and he woke up and he was dying laughing. He thought that was the funniest. It was funny, but it wasn't. And it's a long story. It doesn't end there, but it's funny.
That's funny. I just don't even know how you stand that, going up and down like that. So you're on a ship, and this is like where you would...
That's the port where you go down into the engine room.
Okay.
There's a ladder there, and
so there's a picture of you down.
Right. Yeah. The guys were standing down below. They saw me there and took a picture. Probably.
That's funny.
Going to blackmail me there.
So did you work long days?
Well, you worked 8 hours, and then you pulled 4-hour watches. Regardless of when you worked, if you had watch duty, you had to do the watch duty. And usually you're doing that at night. At sea, you had to watch you had 4 hours, and then you was off 8 hours for a watch, but you still had to work 8 hours and sometimes more longer than that. If you had something broke down, you had to fix it.
Right.
When you got it fixed, you could go sack out.
So what is this?
That's a training ship that the officers, the midshipmen used.
Oh, okay.
And it was in port there at Pearl Harbor for a month or 2, and I thought it was pretty, so I took pictures of it.
So how long were you in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii? That's
Hawaii.
Hawaii.
The first time there, we were there about probably about a year and a half, and then of course we'd take cruises, different places, go to Midway or whatever, and then they transferred us to Guam. And when we got to Guam, we were there to do surveillance on the islands, the Gilbert Islands, the Marianas Islands, the Caroline Islands. There's probably 1,000 islands over there.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were inhabited, but they're inhabited by native people that but they were still, when I was there in 57, 58, they were still finding bombs that were not exploded that had been dropped either by us or by the Navy, or by the Japanese.
Right.
When during the war. And so if they'd find a bomb, they'd call us, and we'd go out and take a UDT team out there if it was underwater, and they'd get the bomb up and disarm it. And you talk about crazy guys. Those guys, they're nuts. They were fearless.
That's crazy.
But I guess they knew what they were doing, so none of them ever got blew up that I knew of.
Ugh.
So
what is this?
that's the island of Hiroshima.
The
And I never knew there was an island named that. I thought it was a town. So, but I thought that was interesting when I found it out, so I took a picture of it.
And this is?
That's Mr. Simpson. He was my engineering officer, my first engineering officer there on the, he's a Lieutenant JG.
Okay.
Nice guy. He was a really nice guy.
And this is?
And that was captain he was the captain. He was a lieutenant commander. His name was Struck. He got transferred to Saigon, Vietnam, when he transferred out of there. I don't know for sure what he was doing there, but he might have been in charge of some of those river boats. They put a bunch of river boats in there. And
did you get along well with everybody?
Yeah, we had a pretty good crew. We hardly ever had any problem with it. You always have one or two that want to show how tough they are or something, you know. So
right.
Usually don't last very long. They find out they're not near as tough as they thought.
So where was this taken at?
That was in Pearl Harbor somewhere, and I'm not sure. We were just probably on Baker Dock. That's where we normally tied up.
Yeah. And then, so how did you keep in touch with your family? By writing letters? Writing letters,
and when I was in Kaohsiung, Christmas, the first Christmas, I called home, and I just paid with pocket change in there. It cost like $8 or something like that. And I called. I was talking to Mom, and and so she said, well, "Your dad's here. You want to talk to your dad?" I said, "Yeah." So Dad got on the phone, and he said, "Isn't this costing a lot of money?" I said, "That's all right, Dad. I'm rich."
That's funny. So she put this in the Palladium item, and it says October 4th, 1957.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think she cut that out of Palladium item. I don't know why it was in the item. I don't know whether.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
So what was the food like when you were on the ship?
Food was good. I never had any complaints. Now the food on the second ship I was on was a little bit better than the food on the first ship, because smaller ships, you know, we ate dried eggs sometimes. But they were always, like on Sunday morning, you could go in and fix your own breakfast if you wanted to.
Oh, wow.
And they really always had pretty good food. I never complained about it at all. When I left that ship, when we put it out of commission, I went on an AD, which is a destroyer tender, where they took care of destroyers out in the sea. And it was a big ship, so they had better food. They had more, you know, they'd have dinner rolls and all that stuff. We didn't have any of that.
So how many were on your ship, approximately, the little one?
There's about 130 or 35 guys, something like that, yeah. It's kind of hard to believe there's that many, because the ship was only like, I think, 185 foot long. So,
wow.
But,
so would you all have your own rooms?
Or
barracks?
No. Well, we had, they just had compartments, and they'd have, the bunks were a piece of aluminum about that big round, and it made a single bed, and they tied a piece of canvas between ropes stretched through there, and then you put a little thin mattress about that thick on there. It wasn't the Hilton.
I was going to say it, yeah.
And they were stacked 3 high and sometimes 4 high, depending on the thing. So you had one guy sleeping here, and another guy here, another guy here, and another guy here. And then at your head or feet, there was 4 more or 3 more. I think in our division there was only 3, but some of the other ones had more room and they can go up higher. But yeah, it wasn't that bad. Every once in a while you get a guy, I'll never forget, we had our foot lockers were underneath the bottom bunks. This one kid came aboard, and he was kind of green, and he was a smart guy, but he had no common sense, you know. And I was on the bottom bunk, and he come in like 1 o'clock in the morning and take a shower, and he'd come in and he'd grab my bunk and chain it up, and I'm in there asleep, and he'd chain that bunk up, and I'd roll over against the post and wake up. Well, what's going on here? Finally, I told him, I said, hey, don't lift my bunk up. If you can't take a bath till 1 o'clock in the morning, you wait till in the morning to get in your locker.
That's funny. So what year did you get out?
I got out in September of 1960. I went in on what they called a minority cruise. We called it the kiddie cruise.
Okay.
It was, if you went in before you were 18, you got out the day before you turned 21.
Okay, that's what my dad did.
So yeah, I went in the 12th of July and got out the 12th of September.
And then it accounted for 4 years.
Yeah, well, no, it only counted for 3 years, but you only had to do 2 years to do your duty. But I would have shipped over. I loved it. I loved the Navy, but some things just happened. You couldn't get what you wanted. They wanted me to go to nuclear power school, and nuclear power was new back then. I wasn't interested in.
Right.
I didn't want to do. And first of all, it's shore duty. I didn't want shore duty. I wanted to go.
So when you got out, where did you go then? Did you come back here?
Yeah. Well, they moved us from. I came back home on a 30-day leave, and I had to go back to Long Beach, California for 42 days.
Okay.
And when I got back there was the engineering officer on that new ship had been a damage control officer on the first ship I was on, and he had come aboard from Merchant Marine School, and he came aboard wearing Levi's and his Navy shirt, and the captain saw him, and he absolutely read him the riot act. And so he came down in the engine room. There's 2 or 3 guys down there playing cards. We were playing cards with, and he said, guys, and we jumped up, he said, sit down. Said, told us his name. He said, I've got a problem. And he said, the captain he's not happy with me because of what I'm wearing. And he said, he wants me to give him a list of every pipe on this ship, what it carries, what it's made of, what the pressure is, and, can you guys help me? We said, yeah. Is that all you need? Well, he said, I told us what all you need. So we'll do it for you. And so we did it. We just put it all together and gave it to him, and he gave it to the captain. And the captain gave him high marks for it, so we couldn't do any wrong after that. But he was my engineering officer on the next ship I got, and he tried every way in the world to get me to ship over. And I said, That
was it. So when you came back here, what happened? Tell me about your family.
I came back here and I went to work. I got out in September, so canning season was on. I went to work at Dunreath, Indiana, in a canning factory.
Oh, funny.
And it was canned tomatoes. And I've worked there until they closed. The tomato season was over. And then, actually, they kept me there a couple months because when they can these tomatoes, people probably don't know this, but they can tomatoes, they don't label them. They put them in a box with no labels. And then when somebody buys them, they put their labels on them.
Oh, funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah. My wife always said, I got to have Del Monte. I said, it don't matter.
That's right.
They're all canned in the same place.
So tell me about your wife a little bit. When did you get married? And
well, we got married. I was married before. I married a girl when I got out of here. We were married for 9 years, and we did not get along. She divorced me, and I met my wife later. And after I met my wife, after we got married, I found out that she had been a girl that I had been crazy about, but I didn't know who she was.
Oh, funny. Aww.
She worked at Hedges Drug Store, and I worked at the Auditorium Theater.
Yeah.
And I'd buy guitar picks and strings off of her. And I was crazy about her, but I didn't, and she quit. I never didn't know where she was, but she lived in Brookville. And after we were married about 2 years, she got to tell me she worked at. I figured out who she was. I said, life's funny. But we've been married 52 years now. I'll be 53 in Christmas.
Okay.
And so.
And you said you live in Oxford now?
We live at the Knolls in Oxford. My wife had a couple of strokes last year, and she has to be in a place where somebody can take better care of her than I can. So.
Yeah. That's a nice facility there. Well, Larry, I want to thank you for sharing your experience today.
Well,
thank you for your service.
I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, you did awesome. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice.
Well,
and I appreciate you taking time to come here.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
So be sure to tune in next month for another edition of Hometown Salutes.